Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by 3 Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for coffee and conversation. With 50 years of clinical experience, Dr. Dorian Mintzer, aka Dori, is an experienced therapist, retirement transition, money, relationship, and executive coach. She's also a consultant, speaker, and writer. She has been weaving adult development, holistic life planning, and positive psychology into programs that shape clients' roadmaps for wiser, more enhanced living. She hosts the popular Revolutionize Your Retirement Interview with Experts series and is co-author of the award-winning book, The Couple's Retirement Puzzle, the 10 must-have conversations for creating an amazing new life together. Dori is also co-producer of the Career Playbook, Second Half Plays, and has contributed to a number of other books, such as Live Smart After 50, Not Your Mother's Retirement, 65 Things to Do When You Retire, 70 Things to Do When You Turn 70, 80 Things to Do When You Turn 80, Out of the Box Retirement, Role Models and New Possibilities, and Right Source Retirement, Best Practices for Employers and Employees.
Welcome, everybody, to the bright side of longevity. I'm here with my 2 illustrious colleagues, learning something every day from them. But today, we're going to learn something even more because we have a guest that we have long sought after, because Dori, as you just heard, is connected to everything, be that people or subjects that have to do with longevity, and does it in a way that is definitely the bright side. So I can't think of anyone more appropriate to have on the show. Dori, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I feel honored to be part of the guests that you've been having, so thank you.
It's our honor, truly, Dori. Tell us, let's start, if you would share how you got interested in this work. And you have 50 years of experience, so that's incredible. How did it all start?
Well, I think I always knew I wanted to work with people, and it sort of morphed over the years of how I've worked with people. But I've always been interested in people in life transitions, and it's sort of followed my own aging and how I've gone through the trajectory of life. So initially, I was interested in transitions to school, adolescence, pregnancy, marriages, pregnancies, jobs. And then as I approached middle age myself, I began getting interested in adult development and the transitions that happen as we get older. And then I'm actually one of what they call the leading edge boomers. So there was all this hype, back when I was turning 60 and everybody was turning 60. And it got me even more interested in. It was sort of like, yikes, I can't believe I'm the age that I am. What does that mean? Because I began really realizing that 60 for me was so different from my parents' generation. And already there was so much more information about longevity, about, studies about it's 30% genetics and really 70% how we take care of ourselves. So I got more and more interested in adult development, integrating my own experiences, my clinical experiences, positive psychology, which very much has influenced me, thinking about the importance of connection, engagement, purpose and meaning, meaningful relationships, connections, and all of that is just part of our lives throughout our lives. And so it just sort of began developing. And then, with my turning 60, I'm now one of the leading edge boomers still, so I'm now 74. And so it's been dealing with my own life, my own aging, and, societal aging. And so my passion is sort of thinking about how the notions about aging have changed. There's a big paradigm shift that's happened with aging. But I think understanding transitions, understanding and feeling gratitude, being able to reflect and accept ourselves and understand the perspective and wisdom that we bring as we get older, all of that's sort of influenced me and kept me passionate. I always like to think, people talk about the parallels between adolescence and aging, and there really are a lot of parallels, like who am I? Where do I want to live? How do I fit in? But hopefully as we get older, there's that perspective and wisdom that comes because we've had to deal with a lot of the ups and downs of life and the endings and the unknowns and new beginnings. So I think there's something wonderful, really, as if we can accept that idea of becoming elders and becoming mentors and sharing, but also learning from other generations.
Wow, Dori, you're going to be gainfully employed for some time with those kind of topics, the demographic. Hey, I'm taking this journey really with you. I was April. What month were you?
I was February.
Oh, well, thanks
Tiny bit older.
Thanks for being a pace setter for me. There aren't too many these days who are, but you definitely are. And thank you. Well, we don't live very far apart. Dori just lives a little bit north of me and up in Brookline, right? And I'm in Cape Cod, so that's just about an hour, except rush hour traffic will change that. But we're lucky to be in a state, and particularly you, Dori, being in a place where education is so important, and we have such fine institutions. And you share your experiences in one of those institutions, and I was pleased to be a small part of that. You were teaching master's level students, and in the past when I have done that, I sometimes have been shocked at some of the misunderstanding that some of these students have about what it is to be older, what being an older adult is like. What were the most surprising ones you saw?
Well, there were so many of them. It's just so interesting to think about helping people who are in their, say, 20s or 30s think about what it is for being older, because often people think about age as, it's those old people, without the concept that we're all really aging, and we're aging every day. And what I found is there were so many misconceptions. People viewed people 70 as sort of shuffling along, heads down, bent over. There's actually a little video that AARP has showing some millennials, asking millennials first to describe, say, 70-year-olds, and they describe them in all these, ageist ways. And then having some 70-year-olds come on stage, and it was like, wow, like, whoa, is that 70? So part of what my course has been really, it was trying to think about aging with the shifting paradigms that are happening. And part of it was helping people realize that even if somebody has an age, they still have a story. We have stories when we're younger, we have stories when we're older, and the importance of thinking about the whole person, not just perhaps the illness or not the disability or, but really as a whole person. And for many people, they said that they're less scared now. They began to just appreciate that aging is a part of life and that we have some control over how we age. And some people age better than others. One of the assignments that I've had each year, and people say it's probably one of the most important assignments that they've said they've had in their classes, it's interviewing somebody who's over the age of 70 or 75 with a list of questions and parameters about their life, their social life, work, retirement, for some dealing with widowhood or, just the vicissitudes of life. And people would do the interview, write up a paper, then present it to the class, and then talk about what their takeaways were. And it was such an eye-opener for people to just think about people as people, and that not to be frightened by age. And those that were going into more administration positions really began talking about the importance of thinking about policy issues, and that if you have these ageist beliefs, what you're going to provide, for people of a certain age may be very different from what they need and want. And so the importance of asking people, What's important to you? What do you need? What do you want? And for those that were clinicians, for the nurses that were part of it, or people getting their geriatric certificate, it was just appreciating that people are people and their stories. You may be seeing them in the most dire circumstances of their life, but those who are able to still tell their stories, there's such richness that comes on how people have dealt with life, how people have coped, how they're coping, resilience, gratitude, some of those things that are just so important as part of life. So I've loved the teaching and helping younger generations and learning from them too. So I always stand up there and I say, whatever year it is, what my age is, and I bring in people like Roger and other people, and they're just floored often, like, oh my gosh, this person, like Jan Hively, I know somebody that you've interviewed here. Jan has come a number of years, and she's now 88 and talking about all the things she's done and accomplished. And it's such an eye-opener for these students that I think you just should be out to pasture, or you're really over the hill if you're over like 50 or 60. Not the case.
I love what you said a few minutes ago about the parallels between younger people and older people going through some of the same things. Who am I? Where do I want to live? Where am I now? What's my purpose? And exercises like you've just described, it's, we're more alike than different. And being able to appreciate that, I think, is beautiful. And one of the things that I particularly like about your show, Dori, is just your warmth comes through and it's just so inviting. And I wanted to make sure to mention that, because even as we're talking now, you can just feel that in your voice. So thank you for that. What I was curious about today, what are some of the most important changes you've seen in the field of aging over the years?
Well, first of all, thank you for what you just said. There've been a lot of changes. I mean, I think the reality is we're in the midst of what's often called the longevity revolution, that people are living longer. And I think that in and of itself is the backdrop, because it used to be that people would kind of go through the stages of life, work, and then, when you think about it, the traditional age of retirement was 62 or 65. And with the age span, health span, lifespan then, people often would live just a few years longer and then die. Now, with people living to their, 80s, 90s, some into their hundreds, if you look at the traditional retirement age of 62 or 65, there are potentially 20, 30, 40 more years. And it doesn't necessarily mean that many years of being old and, frail and decrepit, but years to be very vital. So I think with that has come a real paradigm shift of recognizing that it is not all downhill after 50 or 60, that there is this kind of plateau that is out there. There are a lot of hills and valleys, not that, life is simple and easy, but there are so many opportunities and possibilities for us if we choose to want to do that. And it can be just feeling our best self, feeling more whole. It can be working in retirement, which always or sometimes sounds like an oxymoron. Why would you work in retirement? Retirement is not retiring from life. So that whole concept of retirement is changing too. Retirement is maybe working in a different way. I mean, we've shifted also from a more agricultural society to the industrial society, and now more to kind of desk positions in many respects. And people aren't, when they're 60, as burnt out and exhausted as prior generations. And so people often, when they're ready to not work maybe in the same way, not work full time, may want to work in a different way, may want to start a company, may want to work for a nonprofit. Sort of that shift from the working and knowing you have to earn a living to what's often called significance, finding the purpose or working more from your heart. And so many people want to keep working in retirement. Others really do want leisure, or at least for part of the time. They feel like I've worked so hard, I want to travel. Now, a lot of that's called into question right now with COVID, but People need to sort of change some of those hopes and dreams, at least for a while. But there's no right and wrong. And, each person, it's an opportunity to think about, how do I want to live this next stage of my life? How do I want to be the best person that I can be? How do I want to be remembered? There's often that shift to also wanting to think about our legacy, not just financially, but, how do I touch people? And generally every day in our interactions, we're leaving a legacy. We're sort of living our legacy. But I think as we get older and knowing we live longer, people are a little bit more intentional about it. So people are writing memoirs, or people are wanting to do recordings and talk about the family stories that have been sort of in the closet, or putting pictures together. There's so many different ways of thinking about how to age and how to stay connected and how to stay vital. So I think that's a big shift that's been happening. Longevity revolution, the paradigm shift. I think a lot more focus on positive psychology, of really focusing on the connection, engagement, purpose and meaning, relationships, achievement. And when you think about it, we get that from work, or we get that from active parenting. And so it's important to think about, how will we build that into our life in this next stage, so that we can feel the connection and engagement, purpose and meaning. So we have that sense of well-being. Because I think being able to, I think that's part of the shift too, of being able to age as vitally and healthily as we can, knowing that even with the best of care, we're all going to get older and our bodies change, and there can be cognitive changes, but there's no reason not to be more whole and vital, hopefully to the end. That's why I like Roger's book so much too, and his work. It's like live long and die short.
Dori, your career has been focused on transitions and also mindfulness. So tell us why those two are so important.
As I mentioned before, I think so much of life are a series of transitions, so that throughout life, there are endings, there's unknowns, there's new beginnings. And I think this next stage of life is very similar. And so what I always suggest to people is think about, how have you handled prior transitions in your life? Do you have more trouble with the end? Do you have more trouble with the unknowns? Do you have more trouble with the new beginning, with all of it, part of it, none of it? I think that by thinking about transitions just as a normal part of life, it sometimes can help us anticipate where the harder part will be for us. And so it can help us think about, what might I experience? What's going to be the hardest part in this next stage of life? Is it leaving a job? Is it, the not knowing what I want to do? Is it really believing that I can do something different and to have some trust and confidence in myself? And I think that there's the interface, I think, with the positive psychology, that the focus is on strengths. It's on our character strengths. It's on what gives us pleasure, what makes us happy, what helps contribute to our well-being. And I think, as I had mentioned, I really am a believer of the connection, engagement, and purpose and meaning. However you define that helps you kind of ground yourself in the world and feel part of the world and feel like you can give back and feel like you can learn from people. And I think that importance of the interdependence of people, intergenerational learning, from older to younger, from younger to older. For some people, being a grandparent or being an aunt or an uncle may be where your purpose is. For others, it may be working. It varies. So I think that's sort of where the interface maybe is of transitions and positive psychology.
I've often thought there should be an app for, connecting a person with decades of experience and wisdom to someone like me who's seeking, for example, right now I have a tool shed that's full of tools. And this isn't my area of expertise at all. And I just want to go on an app and find a person in my area who would be willing to come over and be like, this is what this does. This doesn't work. There's no point in fixing it. Guide me and show me. And I also want to learn a second language. And my first thought is, let me go to an app and find a person who will speak conversationally with me. So I don't think that exists, but I think it should exist so that we can more readily connect that way and exchange wisdom and knowledge.
I think an app like that would be terrific. There actually are some, not necessarily apps, but I do think that's a great idea. But organizations like Encore.org, which have stories of people, and what they're doing in this next stage of life. And I know that Mark Friedman has been really involved. It's part of Encore now, the Gen to Gen, generation to generation, where people get matched up with younger people. There's organizations in most communities I think it's called SCORE. So it's older professionals who might have a skill like a financial advisor or a lawyer who volunteer and might help startups and help people, how to, kind of problem solve if they're starting, or how to set up a budget, or how to create a mission statement. So there are some of those things happening, with the belief that for society to really excel, we need to reach out and interconnect and be interdependent with each other.
We're going to have to research that and see if it's out there. And by the way, when I started my own business many years ago, I spoke with a SCORE counselor because I was so concerned I was going to screw up. And he's like, the first year when you do your taxes, and if you mess up, just say you're sorry and they'll fix it for you. They're not going to haul you off to jail for making a mistake. And he was the one that said, you're doing everything the right way, go for it. So it was just having that encouragement from somebody who was retired. And he said, which was not untrue, businesses are like potato chips. Once you start your first one, you'll never stop. You'll want another one and then another one. But Dori, before I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I wanted to say that I really loved what you said about being mindful, because, the only thing that we know for sure is change is going to happen, whether we like it or not. And I loved your look at kind of taking some mindful reflection over what part of the transitions are giving you the most trouble. Getting started, not knowing what's going to happen, or once you start moving into it. And that was really, really powerful for me, because everybody's going to be different. And knowing that ahead of time, you can get the support you need to get through that portion.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you picked up on that, because I do think that's really important. I think part of what is so nice is to have this opportunity with living longer, if we so choose to be mindful, is to reflect, to think about where have our problem areas been, what's been the most struggle, what do I do well, what are my strengths, what do I want to offer other people. But it just helps normalize it. And I always think a nice little exercise for people is to, think about what are 3 things you're most proud of, that you've accomplished in your life, and why. And what are maybe 3 or 5 really peak experiences that you've had in life, and why? Because it helps you then think about, is it what you've achieved? Is it the people you were with? Is it what the experience meant? Is it, it could be any of those combination of things, but again, can help both inform feeling gratitude and thankfulness of what you've achieved, help you recognize you may have more resilience than you realized, and help you carve out some of those things, that you're curious about, sort of your bucket list, or things you're curious about that you want to do if you have the opportunity, in these next years that are coming ahead.
Well, that's right in line with I'm sure the term gerotranscendence. As we get older, we begin to think about things that matter to us and to our life and to our legacy. Well, talk about transitions. We can't do anything these days without talking about what's happening to us. It is huge, and it is a shared global experience, and it has caused things to happen that I don't think anyone could have predicted. Maybe Fauci could have predicted it, but I don't know. It is quite remarkable. So this is a huge transition. And I think people are beginning to realize that this just isn't just a passing thing, that this is a transition to what some call a new normal, or recent term Teresa introduced me to, next normal. Because I think that a little bit of a nuance there, but that is much more in tune with what's really going to happen. That, life as we have known it is not going to come back. So that's a huge transition at any age, but particularly at an older age, that is huge. So what advice might you have for someone sort of struggling with that?
Well, you're right. We can't even underscore what a huge transition it is, both individually as well as, for our society, our world. And I think, it's interesting because it's bringing ageism to the forefront in a sort of a difficult way, in that, people are considered older if, they're 65 and older, but they're also considered older if they're 40 or 50 and older if they have underlying health conditions. So it's so important for people, to sort of recognize and not totally buy in to more of that ageism. I mean, it is true that as we're older, we're more vulnerable, and some of us are more vulnerable than others because of underlying medical conditions. And I think that it's so important for people to be mindful and shelter in place and wear masks and wash your hands and really take care of yourself. I think also, though, and some people are saying that now 60 is feeling like the new 90, because, everybody's sort of focusing on, you're old. And we do need to protect and take care of ourselves that are older, not for ourselves. And also, I have a husband who's in his 80s who's also got underlying medical things. So anything I were to do, I could bring home, or our son who's younger, who's now living with us right now. So it's affecting all of us in an interdependent way. And I think that hopes and dreams in some ways have to get altered. If travel was a big part of one's kind of wish for kind of retirement, that has to be on the back burner now. There's no travel happening, and it may be for a long while that there may not be traveling. And I know we've talked about in our family, we may not as a couple be able to travel during our lifetimes because of what we don't know about, how this is going to play out, and vaccine, and enough people going to take it, and what will happen. So but I think recognizing that there's some benefits of being older, dealing with this, and that we've dealt with things before. We dealt with those transitions. That's why I think the transition part is helpful, to really recognize we as older people have more resilience than our younger counterparts, because we've dealt with some of the ups and downs of life. Not that you want to say, I want to suffer, but we've all gone through our share of whatever's been hard. And I think being grateful of that perspective and that wisdom, and recognizing and having empathy also for other ages. I mean, I worry about kids my son's age and younger who aren't even able to get started in their life, where everything's on hold, kids graduating from high school, out of college, wanting to go to, professional schools, and everything's sort of in limbo now. And we don't know what's going to happen in terms of education. Will it be in person? Will it not be? Will people get jobs? I mean, so those in the middle age range and the younger and middle age range, are really in a difficult position. And I think pre-retirees, people may have had a plan, I need to work, I want to work. And maybe with the pandemic, you're not going to be able to work. There are a lot of jobs that luckily, some people can do remotely. I think I saw some statistics that, of people 65 and older, about maybe 44, 46% can work remotely, but there are a lot of people who can't. And people may lose their jobs and don't have the retirement nest egg. So it's hard for everybody. But I think that there are some silver linings to keep in mind too, which is people are reaching out and being kinder to each other and trying to focus on some of the gratefulness, and and the reaching out maybe just via Zoom, And I really do encourage listeners, if you happen to be part of the statistic that doesn't use internet, we need the technology now. That's our way of connecting with people. And so I think it's so important it may be hard asking for help, but to ask for help if you need it, to learn just the basics of how to do FaceTime or how to do Zoom. Because I think without having some connections like that, we run the risk of even more of the isolation, loneliness, depression, and we know that those are killers, in addition to the pandemic. So it's a time of learning. It's a time of connecting with people. I know I've started some cousins chats with cousins at different parts of the country, and we talk once a month now. We weren't doing that before. There's some silver linings to things if we can create them. But I think I don't know what the new normal is going to look like. I don't think any of us do. And I think it is helpful to have that frame of transition and trying to figure out how am I going to do the best I can, even if it doesn't come naturally for me to deal with the uncertainty. Let me think about how I've dealt with uncertainty in the past. Let me think, what were the strategies maybe that I used that I can call forth now? It may not be that I'm going to create the exact life that, I was hoping I was going to have at this age, but how do I try to do that as best I can and to know that's good enough? And we may have to kind of think about just trying to be good enough and interact with people and be connected and to try to feel stronger than the pandemic if we can. The unknowns are just so difficult.
Well said. And Dori, I could talk to you all day because I'm taking all these nuggets of wisdom because you're talking about resilience and purpose. I love the resilience piece of looking what's worked for you in the past. How can you bring that forward today? And a few moments ago when you had mentioned asking people their achievements, their 3 achievements and why they're important and what's the peak experiences of their life and is there commonality? Are there certain people that you're involved with, certain situations or volunteering or whatever it is? And these are so important questions for people to ask themselves. And so you've just given people just a whole reservoir of knowledge. And before I go down that whole rabbit hole again, I want to make sure to ask, how can people learn more about you and all the work that you're doing?
Well, thanks for those comments too. So I have a website called Revolutionize Retirement. So it's www.revolutionizeretirement.com. And I'd like all of you to know that on the 4th Tuesday of each month, although not December because it's too close to the holidays, but on the 4th Tuesday of each month, I have what I call Revolutionize Your Retirement Interview with Experts series to help you create a fulfilling second half of life. It's open to professionals and the public. You can access it via phone or the internet, but it is important to know that questions and comments can only be asked via the internet. So it is helpful if you have the internet, but you don't have to. For my 4th Tuesday program, sign up always starts the week before at www.revolutionizeretirement.com. And once you sign up, you'll get all the information about how to access the call, and you'll also get a recording link after the call. But I really invite you to be part of that, and you can learn more about me there and some of the other programs I offer.
And you have some incredible guests on your show. I'm so impressed with the quality and experience of your guests. So thank you for creating such amazing value and putting it out into the world, Dori.
Oh, thank you. And Roger was one of my guests when his book had come out, and hopefully will be a guest again.
Well, I was definitely honored today, and we fully expected it was going to be a positive experience, despite all the challenges and that we're all experiencing. But I know the 3 of us feel very uplifted, and I'm sure our listeners do too. I had an instructor who used to say the important pieces of information that he was giving me, he called pearls. So you gave us a bucket full of pearls today, Dorian, and thank you for that. And please continue what you're doing because you're making a difference.
You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.